I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble, and finally allows us to die with pride, even though sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most.
I love Spider-Man. I have so much passion for this character since I've grown up with him for as long as I can remember. My first time ever seeing anything Spider-Man related was the very first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, and I was blown away at what I was watching. It was one of the few movies that made me want to be a filmmaker. It prompted me to go and check out other Spider-Man media. I couldn't get enough of this character. I love the Sam Raimi trilogy. The first Amazing Spider-Man isn't the greatest, but I actually kind of like it. Amazing Spider-Man 2 isn't good, but hey, there's still things I enjoy about it. The suit in that film might be the best on-screen Spider-Man suit we've ever seen, and the web-swinging sequences are so good that the first 10 minutes of the film will trick you into thinking the movie's gonna be incredible. And Into the Spider-Verse is the best we've seen Spider-Man since the early 2000s. But ever since 2017, when the MCU released their take of Spider-Man, it's left me disappointed. I want to clear something up. I am by no means saying that Spider-Man Homecoming or Far From Home are bad movies. They're made well for what Marvel and Disney want in their cinematic universe. The structure is coherent, the characters have motivation, the directing and cinematography is fine, but that's just it. It's fine for a film production, but as a Spider-Man story, a Spider-Man film, it's far from what Spider-Man means to me. And that's the key here, what Spider-Man means to me. Maybe the MCU Spider-Man is what you're looking for in the character. If that's the case, then awesome. I couldn't be happier for you, and I'm glad we're living in a time where you're getting your preferred version of Spider-Man. There's certain things I look for when watching a Spider-Man film that the MCU has failed to realize in their version of the character. And before we begin, if you haven't seen Far From Home yet, there's gonna be spoilers later on in the video. You've been warned. In every great Spider-Man film, Peter has some type of father figure to look up to in some way to make him want to be the best version of himself. Spider-Man 2 has Uncle Ben, Into the Spider-Verse has Miles' dad and Peter Parker from another dimension, and Spider-Man Homecoming has Tony Stark. I understand what the filmmakers were trying to do here. Yes, having a third Uncle Ben only to kill him again would be overdoing it, so I get that they wanted to switch it up for this new Spider-Man. Fine, I'm okay with that. The real problem here is how Peter is treated. In Spider-Man 2, Peter learns in an environment that encourages growth. It makes Peter want to develop into a more responsible person. The father figure in Spider-Man 2 wants Peter to be the best version of himself and will let him know that with compassion via flashbacks. But in Spider-Man Homecoming,
no, this is where you zip it, all right? The adult is talking.
He's treated like an idiot that doesn't know what he's doing. And in a way, yes, Peter can be an idiot as he's trying to get the hang of being Spider-Man. It's a brand new thing to him and he's going to be making mistakes along the way. But Peter is already Spider-Man in this new reboot. Hell, he's already fought some of the Avengers in Civil War. He should have a grasp of his powers to a certain extent by this point. Having Tony Stark come in and baby him throughout the film is not how this character should learn to grow. He should learn it by himself, through the struggles that he will face while being tasked with this newfound responsibility.
Forever. Yeah, let's
No, please,
Let's have it.
You don't understand.
I should be rooting for Peter to learn and grow as a person, but after seeing this, Peter comes off as a whiny child. I couldn't care less if he gets his suit back because of the way the film is characterizing Peter as a brat at this moment. Compare it to this.
No, Uncle Ben. I'm just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man. No more.
Peter is seen as a responsible adult that by all intents and purposes is doing the right thing in his mind, and the audience understands his reasonings. Here I want Peter to grow and find out that choosing to be Spider-Man is the right move. And he'll learn that once he realizes that Uncle Ben was right all along. The father figure in that film was able to help Spider-Man learn from the choice he made and become a better person by the end of the film. In both scenarios, Peter is giving up the suit. However, in one he's seen as responsible and the other he's seen as a whiny kid. The problem stems from how Peter is written and how they chose to go about Peter having a father figure. He keeps getting his hand slapped over and over again until he finally does something right and is praised for it. Good job, Peter, you finally did something good for once. Here's a fancy new suit with even more gadgets for you to potentially screw up again. I swear he's treated like a dog with this suit being his treat for doing something good. Compare that to learning to make the right choice on his own and being inspired by what Uncle Ben told him before he passed away. I appreciate the thought that went into making this Spider-Man different. This is the third reboot of the character, so it's inevitable that there will be some changes. But this took away what is one of the most empathetic parts of Spider-Man, learning consequences from his own actions and growing from it with the help of a loving father figure that motivates him to do good. This is kind of an extension of my previous point, but Peter learning to cope with his problems alone is what made the character so endearing. How will Peter stop the train? He's gonna have to figure it out himself. How will Peter balance his personal life and the life of Spider-Man? He'll have to figure that one out too. There's always gonna be characters that influence Peter's choices and help him out to some extent, but not hold his hand for him. In the MCU, Spider-Man is either handed information that he doesn't need to otherwise figure out on his own, or saved on multiple occasions from other people because he couldn't handle the situation he was placed in. He can't figure something out? No problem, he'll just ask a suit AI that he named Karen.
Karen, you have to help me override that time lock.
Easy. Need information on something? Ned is talking to him and helping him out. And we don't even need to talk about Tony Stark again. This even extends into Far From Home. Even though Tony isn't physically present in that film, there is still persistent talk about Tony and trying to be as good as Tony and living up to what Tony wanted Peter to be. His presence is more than prominent in that film. Not only that, but Nick Fury and Happy Hogan have come in to also provide Peter with all the guidance he needs for the film. And if you thought for a second Peter wouldn't be treated like a kid again, don't worry, Nick Fury is here to take that job over for Tony.
It's clear to me that you were not ready for this.
Yes, there are moments where Peter pieces things together himself, but not nearly enough. What type of character would you like more? The one who can think fast and figure out problems for himself, or the one who's handed information and all he has to do is follow through what he's been told? Even if we aren't talking about Spider-Man specifically, it's pretty common to like characters who are able to think for themselves and not have others hand them everything. I don't have much confidence in the MCU Spider-Man to tackle problems on his own, and he's had 2 standalone films, been featured in Captain America Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, and I still don't have the faith for this character to do anything without some form of help. He's been against threats far greater than Peter ever did in the Raimi trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man series. I should have the utmost confidence that this Spider-Man can handle most problems, and I don't. I attribute this to the character being tied to the MCU in the first place. The writers will obviously put in characters from other movies in order to make this universe feel more connected, but at the cost of Spider-Man feeling less capable than he ever has been before. I really wish we could go back to a time where it was just Spider-Man in a true standalone movie dealing with the villain on his own, but it doesn't seem like we'll be going back to that anytime soon. One of the most interesting things about the character of Spider-Man is Peter having to go through extreme lengths to hide Spider-Man from everyone. Peter is hiding a deep secret in order to protect those he loves. It's also a way to separate his own personal life with the life of saving others. Having the dynamic of Peter constantly trying to live a double life when both of those lives are hard to keep up with is what makes him relatable to teenagers and young adults. We all have things we have to do. We all feel like we have multiple lives to live with how busy we are, and we're going to be tired from it. Take that feeling of exhaustion and double it. No, triple it, and you have the character of Peter Parker. Seeing Peter struggling to pass his college classes when we know he is a science genius is heartbreaking to see. We want to see him succeed, but the secret that he's hiding is what's making his life harder than it needs to be. MCU Peter does have to hide being Spider-Man and does have a sense of fatigue from carrying the weight of the character, but it's incredibly downplayed in these new films. It drives me insane how Peter being Spider-Man is so casual to his friends and family. Peter being Spider-Man should be a huge concern for Aunt May. Peter is the only person she has left since Uncle Ben was murdered, and she's going to high-five him knowing Peter is putting himself in danger every day, potentially leaving her to live alone for the rest of her life? Or how about when MJ seems to figure out Peter Parker is Spider-Man because it's kind of obvious? Which sure, maybe it is obvious, but there still should be a feeling of astonishment when people find out Peter is Spider-Man and not played off as some gag. It should be a huge deal whenever anyone finds out Peter is Spider-Man. One of the most fascinating things about Spider-Man and superheroes in general is having to hide their identity. Seeing what they're willing to do in order to keep their second life a secret to protect those they love. Couple that with Peter trying to pass college classes, attempting to pay rent, and struggling to see his close friends so that they don't feel neglected. That's the essence of the character of Spider-Man. It's what makes him relatable to me and you. Seeing how Far From Home ended does not leave me excited for the future of this character. Stripping away the identity of Spider-Man takes away so much of what makes that character special. I really don't know how they're going to approach the next film in the series, but needless to say, I'm not optimistic about it. Even though I'm not a fan of the way the new films are portraying Spider-Man, there are still some great moments in those films. The scene where Peter is going to homecoming with Liz and her dad after Peter figures out he's the Vulture is great stuff. This sequence in Far From Home left me in awe. Feels like a comic book panel brought to life. It was also great to see Spider-Man do the traditional final swing again in Spider-Man films. That being said, these are all moments. They're cool to see on their own, but it's not enough to redeem this version of Spider-Man. I want to love this Spider-Man. I really do, but I just can't overlook all the issues I have with the character. If you would have told me 10 years ago that Spider-Man would be paired up with the Avengers someday and would be a part of the MCU, I would have been the happiest person on earth. Unfortunately, the direction they chose to take him in is one that I just can't get behind. I genuinely hope that someday I can be a fan of this version of Spider-Man, but until then, I guess I can rewatch the Raimi trilogy for the millionth time.